uses and limitations of consumer price index in a second. I just want to show you a very straightforward sample question with this. So let's say you look at the next page there, and if you go into where it says calculating the rate of inflation there, calculating the rate of inflation. So this is the question that's come up 2 years in a row now. Question like this, and it tends to come up the same way. You're given 3 goods and you have to calculate using a composite price index, which is a weighted index. You have to calculate the inflation rate. So if you look at what it says here, it says calculating the rate of inflation, right? There are 3 steps really for you to remember. First of all, you calculate the simple index, then you apply the weight, and then you add them together. So they were kind of the last 3 steps in our thing, weren't they? So remember, if I come back here, I said that you calculate a simple index, then you applied the weight, and then you add it. So they're kind of these 3 together, right? Those last 3 steps. So if we come back down here, first thing, you're going to calculate the simple index, you multiply it by the weight, and then you add them together. So it's SWA, simple weight add. Simple weight add, they're the steps. So here's a sample question. It says, for a composite or a weighted price index covering the 3 categories of expenditure given in the following table, calculate the price index for the current year. The base year is 100. So coming back to that thing I was talking about, an index, that's the way it works. And you're given 3 categories of goods and services. And this is always the way these questions are. So you've got food and drink, clothing, and then others. And you're told the percentage of income spent on these 3 categories. So 30% is spent on food and drink, 20% is spent on clothing, and then the other items category, 50% of income is spent on that. You're told the prices of each of these things in the base year. So this is the year we're comparing to. So food and drink was tenner in the base year, 40 quid for clothing in the base year, and then 20 quid for other items in the base year. Then the current year, so this is the year we're comparing. Prices are, for food and drink, they're 11.50. So we can see there's inflation there. There's been an increase in the price level there. We can see that clothing prices have fallen. So there's been deflation in that category. And then for other items, prices have gone up from 20 to 22. So there's inflation there. So what we want to find out is overall, taking account of all 3 of these changes, what's the situation? What is it, the overall inflation or deflation rate? So the first thing that you need to do there is the S part. So SWA, you need to calculate the simple index. So that is the first thing that you need to do. And that's really, really straightforward. All you do is you're finding the current year prices as a percentage of the base year prices. So if we come down here, our current year price for food and drink was 11.50. So we're going to divide that by a tenner there and then multiply it by 100 to get it as a percentage. So that will give us 115 here. That's where that's coming from. Then for clothing, you're going to do the exact same thing. So you want to find out the percentage of current year prices as a percent of base year price. So current prices in clothing here are 36. So we're going to divide that by 40 and multiply it by 100, and we get 90%. So clothing are not the price. Current year price of clothing is 90% of the base year. So we've had deflation there of 10%, coming back to my index thing, right? And then other items, current year price are 22, divided by 20, multiplied by 100, and that is 110. So that is the first step in calculating inflation using a composite price index. You apply the simple index. So all you do is find the current year prices as a percentage of the base year. The next thing then is that you apply the weights. Now, what I would do with these questions, so to apply the weights, all you do, right, is you multiply. So what we just did there in step 1, we got the simple index. All you're going to do is multiply that by the weight, right? So that's by the weight. Now, crucially, as a decimal. So what I would do, and this is where students go wrong on this all the time. So what I would do with these questions, right, just before I even start doing any calculations, you're given these 3 columns. What I would do here is I would take what I'm given here and I would put it in the weight column as a decimal. So like 30% as a decimal, that's 0.3. So I'd write that in there. So I would write that one in there as soon as I see the question. 20% as a decimal here is 0.2. I'd scribble that one in there as soon as I see it, right? And then 50% as a decimal is 0.5. And I would write that in there straight away. Because what a lot of students will do is they'll get the idea, right, that they need to multiply the simple index, so what they calculated here, by the weight. But what they'll do is they'll start messing around trying to calculate 30% of 115, and they'll just really struggle with the numbers. So it's a lot more straightforward if you've expressed this as a decimal. So here, to calculate to apply the weight, we're looking at this column here. So what we're doing is we're taking this number, which we did in step 1, and we're going to multiply it by the weight, but as a decimal. So 115 by 0.3, that would be. So by 0.3 gives us 34.5. Then for clothing, we worked out the simple index was 90. We did that up here in part 1. So now we're just going to multiply that by the weight, which we're told. So the weight is 20%, or as a decimal, you'll have written this in as a decimal, you'll have written in 0.2 in here. So 90 by 0.2 is 18. And then for other items, we calculated the simple index in part 1 is 110, multiply it by the weight, so the weight is 50%, and you'll have written 0.5 in here, so it just shows you that's what you should do at the start. 110 by 0.5, and the result is 55. So S, simple index, W, apply the weight, and then the A is you just add them together. So you're adding the 3 figures that you've calculated, 34.5 to 18 to 55, and it gives you this figure down the bottom of 107.5. These 3 figures together give 107.5. So remember, this is a price index. So the base year represents 100%, and we're 107.5% compared to prices are 107.5% compared to the base year. That means that inflation is 7.5%. The prices are 7.5% greater than they were in the base year. So that's how it's done. Remember that SWA, simple index, so that's expressing the current year price as a percentage of the base year. You apply the weight, so just multiply it by the weight as a decimal, which you're given in the question, and the A there adds them together.